Yes, we are live. Welcome everyone to our today's online event together with Ibua Journal, our long-term cooperation partner. It's time for Ibua Lounge. We have started this series of poetry events some time back, and we want to continue even in times of lockdown. We cannot meet physically, but we come together here on this online platform. And a warm welcome to our special guests today. We have Rachel, our moderator, who's going to lead us through the evening. Then we have our writers and editors, Karungi Charity, Jackie Asimwe, Adero Ongom, and Achelam Derek. Our today's topic is We the People. It will be a literary discussion exactly on this theme, and we are very excited to see what kind of perspectives, what ideas, what challenges are coming out of this conversation. And my name is Sina Weber. I'm the cultural coordinator of Goethe Centrum Kampala, and together with the cultural team, Barbara Sommer, the director, and Annie, the project assistants, we are looking forward to tonight. That's from my side. Rachel, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Sina. Ibua, as Ibua, we are really, really grateful for the opportunities that Goethe Centrum continues to give us, for the space to just do the things that we do. And so, yeah, this is really great. As you have said, this will be a conversation about the publication that we put out, We the People. And so we are speaking with some of the writers and the editor of the issue. Just to give you, for those who may not know who Ibua Publishing is, Ibua Publishing is an enterprise of the Lantern Mead Foundation. The Lantern Mead Foundation is a literary house that is essentially here to collect, document, and preserve Africa's cultural, historical, and imaginative heritage. Such a mouthful, I know, but it really just speaks to everything that we are about. So Ibua Publishing is an initiative dedicated to publishing, both online and in print. So far, we began the online publication Ibua Journal in 2018. So this will be our third year. And in print, we have one book out, and there'll be 4 others coming out. So this conversation is just one of many things that we are involved in and that we do on a regular. So welcome, everybody. I hope that you will be entertained, but also enlightened by the conversation that we're going to have. We have some very, I would say, profound people here. Just to give some introductions, the editor of We the People was Karungi Kwatampora, Charity.
Hi, everyone.
Yes. Hi, Charity. Charity was the managing editor at the time for Ibua Publishing. But she also she was the chief editor for the publication. Charity is a Ugandan editor, a writer, a baker, a trained social worker. And so you can see just how wide her interests are, her abilities are. And so it's always wonderful to read what she writes and also to hear what she says. Jackie Asimwe it is difficult to say everything that she is, but I will speak to what she is doing right now. So she's currently the CEO for SeaSource Africa. She is a prominent Ugandan lawyer. If you do not know who Jacqueline Asimwe is, you're either very, very young or, or you have not been in Uganda. And even then, if you Google Uganda, her name will definitely come up. So she is truly one of those voices that we are always happy to hear from and to read from, really. Ongoma Dero, who I am also meeting for the first time. I have only read him. And so this is also exciting to see his face and put the face to the words. He's also a lawyer and a writer, obviously. And he says he's a proud member of the Mulungushi Club. So maybe he will tell us about that and what it means and what it means for his work and how he writes. Achalam Derek Kinyera is one of Ibua's proudest. I do not want to use an article for him, but he is one of our biggest exports, I would say, out in the world. He's a poet, he's a writer, he's also an intern doctor. And so I hope you can begin to see that everybody is not just one thing, they encompass a lot more in their lives. And that speaks to how they write and what they write about. And I hope it can also inspire all those closet writers out there, to come out and speak for who you are and speak about what you know. So welcome again, welcome everybody. Welcome to our guest speakers.
Thank you.
So yeah, we are going to have a conversation about we the people. And I'll start with Karungi because you were the chief editor for the publication. And the title, We the People. Someone I shared it with said, "Are you the government?" And that really was the first question that came to mind. But so the title of the publication speaks volumes. So what informed the choice of the theme for this publication and how you selected your writers for this, for We the People?
Hi, everyone. Hi, once again. So let me speak briefly about Ibua, just give a background about Ibua. So a guiding principle for the Ibua journal is that it would be a space for a literary and a social commentary of the life lived on the continent, not just in Africa, but the continent as well. Sorry, not just in Uganda, but continent-wide. And so we approach every issue with that in mind as our backdrop. With regard to We the People, we initially set out to provide an issue around national independence, and it was going to be released its release was supposed to coincide with the celebration of Uganda's independence. That's October 9th, 2020. However, during the time of development, we found ourselves going through the general elections. And so it kind of broadened. It went from just speaking to national independence, having the writers share their personal reflections on what that is 58 years later, what that looks like, what is lacking, into a discussion as well about our political spaces and how the normal everyday Ugandan is treated in respect of that. And so that informed the final title of the publication. So we were looking at independence, national independence, that is. And then at the end of it, we choose We the People, because it's speaking about, it's the people of Uganda, each one of us, the different walks of life that we live, reflecting back our experiences, our hopes, our despair, on whatever it is with regard to our nation, with regard to, the future of the nation, and, what we hope for it. The selection of the writers, well, initially we started with, as I mentioned, we were looking at national independence. And so we sent out several invitations to different people from the Lantern Meat community, the Ibua community. So we've got this wide community of people that have come in and out of the Lantern Meat space, the Ibua space, or are connected somehow. And so they were, so we thought of a few names, quite a handful of names, and sent out requests for essays. We had 4 sub-themes at a time. One, we wanted to look at the history of our people. So we are a nation, yes, but we had kingdom nations that existed for years before the nation was created, the state was created. And so we wanted a history on that. We wanted to look at the state of the country and have people talk about that as well. And then also look at what our hopes for the country are. But I think I know, because of the general election experiences, we ended up having a focus on the state of affairs and how that affects us, and how, and therefore what we hope for that. And so we ended up with the authors, with the writers that we did: Ongom, Jackie, Achilam, Kangera Wopsowazi, and I.
Rachel, you are still muted.
These internet things, I don't know sometimes. Anyway, but here I'm. Hear me. Yes, the process of creating work, especially literary work and writing, and you talk about the evolution of it, what you intended versus what you eventually put out. What informs that process for you, and how did it work in terms of putting out with the people, especially going through coming through COVID, coming through an election process that was quite difficult? Where did you find the courage? I think because there are some places, there's some things that we say that we are afraid to talk about because we don't want to show ourselves to actually think these things. Yeah. So how did that work for you? Are those things that you thought about as the editor? And yeah, I think that, yeah.
I do acknowledge a hesitation to have something said, because we live in a crazy time. You have no idea how what your words will, no, you kind of have an idea that if you say some things in some ways, it could be detrimental to you, to the organization that you work with, and stuff like that. Again, we the people, we are stuck with this constant presence of a constant threat to our well-being. So in doing the work, in designing the issue, we had a goal, and the goal was to provide reflections on national independence. And to look at national independence requires that you assess the state of affairs, that you think about how, and not assess them from, say, technocrat level, but from the normal from the everyday Ugandan, the wananchi, we the people who live in this country every day, excluded from the corridors that get things done a certain way, and so we approached it with a goal of talking about national independence, how that reflects for us, how that reflects to us. And it evolved because, again, like I said, with the general elections, you feel some things more intensely. The injustice is on display more clearly. The brutality is on display again. And I write about it in my essay. When you watch the video of the young girl flinging herself into the military, the group of military men, you feel her angst, you feel her despair, and you also feel fear. You feel fear for her well-being, and it's just in terms of evolution, I feel like it was just inevitable that we had to present the issue the way we did.
Okay, thank you, Charity. Now I would like to move on to the authors, to the writers. Charity mentions that you were given a general idea, a theme to say, to write on. But at the end of the day, your story was your own. Your essay was your own. You determined which subject matter you would write on. Ongom, you chose a more, let's look at our history kind of story. Yeah, let's look at the facts as they were experienced, or rather, let's take another look at the facts as they are. When I found it interesting because even Jackie, in terms of how you approached, because Karongi says she gave you options looking at our history, looking at the current state of affairs, looking at what we hope for. You had two very different styles of approaching this story. Jackie's story was very personal. I felt very personal. And yet, Ongom's story, on the other hand, or his essay, was eye-opening in ways like, oh, wait, if I didn't learn this in history, I didn't know this fact, I didn't know these details. So how did you go about choosing your style, and how do you feel that style reflects not just on you, but on the story the story about Uganda that you want to tell? We'll go with Ongom first. You're muted, Ongom.
Oh, I'm quite awkward with this as well. So thank you so much for having me here for the conversation. I start by expressing gratitude to the Ibua Journal and especially to the editor. When I got news or a request for an essay, I was actually contesting for Lira City East Member of Parliament, muscling up myself. So it was kind of a tough period. So I had to pick the easiest topic that was available to me, and that was the history of our country. Now, my interest in the history of Uganda goes back to school. You go to school and then you're encountering lots of information, but then when you come out of school and you're meeting a little, let me say, the elders or those who actually participated in the politics of our country, they have a sort of oral history that is very different from that which we get from school. So it forced me to go and do personal research. So I decided to go to the UPC library, And I was blown because I got lots of information that you don't get in the schools, that you don't get anywhere. Information that is just seated down there and no one is bothered about all this history. And the product of my work, they're all referenced. So I was writing them with more like an ego eye, not writing what I feel, but writing what is or what I found, what was. This is what I saw. This is what I have come to learn. This is what I have come to understand about my country. So I'm putting it out there, whether you like it or you don't like it. I mean, it's just that. So are we going to have a conversation on this, or we are going to try to frame it another way? So the first essay was actually more about the history of Uganda, where we came from, and trying to differentiate it with the very, very Eurocentric accounts of our history as very warring people, hooligans, I would say. People were always fighting with each other. So I'm trying to bring a context and say, well, those were there, but then they're not written in context. They don't get the context that they deserve. So I tried to show that, well, as much as those were there, we were actually people who were together. We lived together in one community. You know, the Lango were not just the Lango. The Acholi were not just the Acholi, or the Banyoro, or the Batoro, or the Banyakole were not just the Banyakole, but they existed as Luoba Bito before. They existed as Chwezi before, you know, and even by the time Buganda Kingdom was rising up, it was because these big kingdoms were simply breaking apart. So if these people existed as Luoba Bito, if they existed as Chwezi, then how come all these differences are inherent amongst us today? So I tried to say, okay, well, there came the British, you know, who wanted to do whatever they had to do to exploit us, and they had to use divide and rule and all that. So, but after writing that, I was content. I thought I'd finished my writing and so on and so on. But then I got a request from the editor, and she's like, oh, but you're supposed to have, you know, a way forward. And when she asked me for a way forward, I was lost. I was like, what's the way forward? Because I had not thought so strongly about a way forward. So I had to go back and read the article, and I'm like, what is missing here? And I found the article needed a lot far more research and a lot of referencing. So I only decided to write a new article. I was like, let me write about the economic history of our country, where we came from and where we are going. So upon writing the economic history of our country, she's like, whoa, this is actually what I was looking for. So I was lost. I was like, okay, if that is it, then just see what you can do with the article. So she binds up and comes up with the article, and I'm impressed. I'm blown apart. I didn't know this is the work actually editors do, because most times I write an article and it's rejected because of being too radical. I'm known for being too radical.
Is it just me?
Too uncompromising, you know, because there are certain things you write and they contradict everything. So you have to put yourself in a position to defend. But then the editor does come up with something perfect, and I'm amazed. And I'm like, well, do it. I mean, use the article, do it. Just do whatever you wish with the article. So, of course, I was a little bit disappointed with the very, very final version, which I think had additions which I did not like, especially on the part of, that the period after the gold allegation scandal, where Dr. Apollo Milton Obote arrests, members of parliament. It's kind of presented that he actually arrested them maliciously without the rationale that actually these people were trying to commit a coup, and they had to be, that was the only way. So I was a little bit disappointed, and I was stuck. I was like, how do I do this? But then looking at the overall, I was like, actually, this is perfect. This is justice. And I wouldn't even get the space to have such an article published anywhere. And here she was. I mean, I was amazed. So that was really the content and the desire of my writing, using an ego's eye, picking what I found and putting it out there for whoever is going to read to make his or her own conclusion. Just an alternative to the history of our country. Yes, that's where I did come from.
Thank you, Ongom. I have some questions for you, but I want Jackie to speak first, and then Achlam, and then we'll come back, because you hinted on an issue that I think we can discuss in this conversation. about the relationship between the writer and the editor in publishing. But yes, Jackie, please go ahead. Thank you so much, Ongom. That was very eye-opening, and I will be back.
Thank you.
So, I say this with I know I'm shooting myself in the foot, so Charity, don't look at me with bad eyes. But I am a lazy writer in the sense when I hear the word journal, I think academic. I have to read 101 papers and know how to quote properly and what is, So I actually first said no because I thought, one, I don't have the time to read because journals are written, by very serious academics and I'm not one. So there's always that, not that I'm unserious, there's always that fear of, do I have the right thing to say to present to not just a literary work, but an academic work as well? So that was one. And so when they came back and said, no, please go ahead, do what you need to. I sidebarred Kangere and said, really I can't, but I'd love to write. So what I ended up doing, I'm a lawyer by profession. I'm a feminist. I've worked a lot around women's rights issues. And so what I draw from is the familiar and the familial in my work. Prior to this, about 8 years ago, I actually wrote a piece which I titled Uganda Reminds Me of a Battered Woman. Again, just connecting with the work that I've done, trying to enable women walk through what is a toxic relationship and get to the point where they can separate themselves from the toxicity. So fast forward to the article that I wrote, I am a firstborn. So in that sense, I'm a firstborn, I'm a sister. I've always wondered what it would be like to actually have an older sister. And there are women in my life that played that role, either aunties that were slightly older than me or, schoolmates that were slightly older than me. So I had that sense of casting Uganda, therefore, in that sort of light. I'm 50, Uganda is 8 years older than me. So what is it to relate? What is it like to relate to an older sister? And for those that are firstborns, you will also know that often when you're older, you're required to set the example for the rest of the siblings. And you're supposed to set a good example. Or if you set a bad one, then you also become the reference point. Don't be like X. So I really wanted to simplify it in that way. I look up to Uganda. Indeed, we all look up to our older siblings. We admire them. We aspire to be like them. There are things about them that we totally love. But there are also things that we totally hate because they make mistakes, they stumble, they fall. And so I use the analogy of our presidents that go in and out as the men in Uganda's life, my big sister, Uganda. And she just doesn't seem to be able to know how to pick and choose the right man because her men have not only affected her, but they've affected the rest of the family. And we're all in turmoil. Every time we hear Uganda has a new boo, we are looking for where to hide. And I was merely expressing, just generally what we've felt, the angst we've gone through, the fact that in our 58 years of independence, we've never had a peaceful handover. And so anyway, so those were the, drawing from my experience, but also wanting to make the writing as accessible as possible for those who might not want to dig into a more academic treatise about we the people. So how do I make it relatable and, so that people can put themselves indeed in the story that I'm telling.
Thank you so much for that, Jackie. I can assure you that, at least for me, it struck a chord in a very uncomfortable way. Because if this was a person and if this was indeed my sister, the things that I would be doing to help her would be radical, I would be moving things, I would be fighting. And so it just really made me think about, do I really love, what kind of relationship I have with my country and what it means to me, and yeah, so it really got me thinking, and I hope it can get others thinking about about Uganda and what relationship we have with Uganda and what it can mean for us, versus just, oh, it's terrible. Yeah. So thank you very much for that. I will be back with the next question for everybody, but I want to speak to Achalam. And Karungi also wrote to the subject of We the People specifically, but we'll come to her last. Achalam, your work in this publication is not specifically an essay on We the People, but you availed us with 3 book reviews, yeah, that that spoke to the subject that we were, discussing in the issue. Why book reviews? Yeah, because obviously you have a thing for them, you know. So what is it about talking about books and how you feel that? Do you feel that it's essential for us to not just in our telling stories, but to read things that I feel like I'm leading you with this question, but please,
please lead me.
No. Why the book reviews? What did you feel about these particular? What did you feel that these particular books lent themselves to our experience? And yeah, that's the other questions will come later.
I think why book reviews? First of all, I love books. I think all of us love books, but I think for me it's extra. I have a special relationship with books, and I like talking about books. I like discussing books and analyzing books and breaking them down and all that. And I have to say that from what Jackie spoke about, the metaphor of your relationship with your country, it features a lot in all the book reviews that were particularly selected for this theme of We the People. Human Acts is Human Acts by Han Kang, Shadow King by Maza Mengitse, and The Old Drift. Those are the 3 book reviews. And in what is common in all these 3 books is still what Jackie talked about, one's relationship with their country. And it's not, and country is not just seen in a sort of a political sense, but it's the people themselves, and people are further broken down into the society, by location, by culture, by your social hierarchy, and family. And all these books, they develop one's relationship with their family, and they use that as a metaphor for their relationship to their country. And you find that characters, majorly the main characters in all these books, they are vocal about the place of their country in the political, economic, and social, in a social way. So find that it is true, as an individual, I sometimes question and I wonder how I feel, or what my thoughts are towards my relationship with the country. But I also query, what do others think about their country? Because it's the others who are in control of the future of the country. And if I am to be aware what others think about their country, I, in a way, in a sort of roundabout way, inform myself of what I could do to improve my country or change my country in a direction that I think is the right direction. So I don't know whether I've answered your question, but I think that is, yes, that's it. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, you have answered the question. Thank you for that. We are supposed to have some time for a Q&A from our audience. But just before we go into that, I would like to go back to what Tongom experienced in writing his essay, the relationship between the editor and the writer. Ongom has already shared that it was strange. There are some things that ended up in the piece that he felt like, maybe not what I would have exactly wanted to say, and yet he still feels that generally it was great. Um, was that the same for Jackie and Achalam and Karungi? You wrote an essay as well.
Yeah.
Did you edit yourself or someone else edited?
Um, my work is edited. So for this essay, I was edited by a motive observancy.
Okay. So what was that experience like for you? You're an editor, but also a writer. So is it the same way that Ongom experiences working with an editor? Because this was, I think, his first time, right, Ongom? Working this way with an editor.
So for me, before I answer the question for my experience, I'd like to speak to the editor-writer relationship for Ngom's essay. So like he shared, he ended up submitting 2 different essays, which I thought were very interconnected. And so we had that discussion about, rather than treat them as 2 separate essays, let's have them as one lengthy essay. The other snag for us was that we had 2,500 words as our upper limit, and that is nothing when you're trying to tell a history that covers 58 years and trying to keep important details throughout. Then the other thing as an editor, because I thought that what he provided was I had the same experience as you, Rachel, as you mentioned, that in reading in reading parts of the essay, I was struck by the deviation from what I had been taught in school, and like what's common knowledge of our history. And so I thought that those aspects were important to keep, especially for the journal because we are curators, for us to keep those details of the history, but also to remove, I know that he disagreed with some of those things, we talked about them, but remove aspects that might come off as bias, and therefore change the reader's appreciation for what is being said. And so as an editor, it's walking the tightrope of trying to grasp the writer's heart and intention, and to be able to have that communicated clearly to the reader without any blocks, without any distractions. Yeah. So that was with Ongom. With my experience, editor-writer, I think because I function a lot as editor, I understand the heart of the editors. So when my work goes to, I've gotten better with it. Before it used to be such a struggle, like it was, it has to do with an assessment of self, of my abilities and stuff like that. So I'm not always sure that my work is good enough. And then when you send it to another person, and then just the fear of being told it falls short is always, at the back of my mind. However, because I work as an editor, I know that not all editors are bad, and that editors aim to help you get the best out of your work. So personally, I don't mind that relationship. I find it valuable. Oh, I like to say that the best stories, the stories that we love, do not come forth in solitary confinement, the author alone. Those stories come forth in community. You've got the author, you've got the editors, you've got the peer editors, you've got, there's a whole world that exists around stories.
Thank you for that, Karungi. Ongom, do you have anything else you'd like to add to that?
No, not really. Just gratitude. In all my writing, I've never encountered an editor like Charity. No, not yet.
Thank you.
So I was just seeing my work come off unexpectedly. I was surprised myself. I didn't know it could be so good.
Very
so
well
thank you so much.
done, Karungi.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, Jackie, did you have anything to speak to that?
No. I think what Karunji did was rearrange a few things, but generally left the gist, intact, which I appreciated. Yeah.
Achalam, because you work as an editor, as a writer, your experience is a lot like Karungi's. And yeah.
First of all, I would like to say being in a space where there's Rachel and Charity, I feel anxiety for all the drafts that I'm supposed to hand in before deadline. I have this guilt, every time I see Charity's name in an email, I have this guilt that I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing, but that aside, I think
I'm
it's
not that bad.
it's not that you're bad. It's a good sort of pressure that I get from my editors. Is that they push me to be more. I write something and I think job, but there is something, and I've told Charity this a lot of times. She has an eye for certain things that you don't see, and the speed at which she spots these things is it is. I feel envious if I had that editor's eye. So yes, my editorial relationship with the editors of Ibua, Charity, Rachel, Kangire, and others is that they have pushed me to be more conscious of what I write. I started off as this sort of person who is maybe I say maybe subconscious of what I'm writing, but I'm more conscious and more intentional of what I am writing, and I think there's to be the sort of writer who thinks on a global scale in their writing, not global as in the world, but global in the world of the story. And how does the third sentence of the fourth paragraph feed into the sixth sentence of the second last paragraph to make the whole story, click, to make the review click, to make things, go in order. And that is one thing that I've benefited from the relationship. The writer and editor relationship is the sort of synchronicity on a sort of ideology or philosophical level in terms of what you are writing about. Many times I have edited writers, and to and fro, you realize that you are all understanding things or experiencing a story or an essay at different wavelengths, and it requires you to know the writer, not in the context of just as a writer, but as an individual, to understand where their ideas come from, to understand how their idea is formed. And I like this thing that we had with the Bua of the why I write, how I write, sort of essay, letter to yourself years from now. And that opened up my mind and that has helped me improve myself as an editor, and also sort of also helped me to be not so emotional when my babies are murdered by these hardcore editors like Charity and Rachel. So understand where they come from with their red pens, and they kill my best sentences, and I understand that it makes things better. But so that relationship, that level of understanding of the writer, I think that's one of the most important things in a writer-editor relationship. So, yes.
Thank you so much, Achalam. And the red pens are not that much to exaggerate. But yes, as we wait for more questions to come through, I think the final question, I want to combine two questions really for you before we go and answer the audience questions. This process took a while, yeah? As Karungi said, initially it was meant for an independence issue, which was in October, November, but we ended up publishing in May. And so one, did that change your story for you or its meaning, given that it's like it was not, it was you wrote the first drafts pre-election, and then what was published came out way after the election period. Did did it change how you viewed your own story or what it meant for you or its relevance to you? And then also, I would like to quote Doreen Baingana, who had a conversation over the weekend, when she said that writing allows us to reflect on our way of being. How did this help you do that, if it did? And what are the results of those reflections? Is there something that has changed for you, or has it just simply affirmed the things that you are currently doing in relationship to our nation, in relationship to how we view it and what we want to see come from it? So yeah, maybe just to say the questions again. Um, did the time lag change how you viewed your story, or or what the relevance of it? And then did it help you reflect? Did your story help you reflect on how we are and what have been the results of those reflections, if any? I think you can each take a turn. Whoever wants to go first, go ahead.
Can I go first before people finish nice points?
Go ahead, Achela.
So, most of these reviews that I wrote were written uh, before the events of the election, the coverage of the election. And when I got feedback from the editor, some changes to be made, I added in a few things. And the experience of a writer between drafts sort of influences how can draft turns out to be, because I found myself being a bit I think I felt a bit more angry in my second drafts of reviews than in the first ones. And the first ones, they were all, I felt that the books were well written. You know, the writer did incredible things with words, magical, sentences are beautiful, what not. But in the second drafts of the review, I found myself being more critical of using the metaphor or the images or the events in the books, in these fiction stories from other writers from other countries, and sort of using them to contextualize the events that are happening right now. And I have to say that as an individual, I wasn't happy about the events and that it reflected. And what I saw was that there was a sort of paralysis or a shock. These events happened. It's as though people didn't know these things could happen, and yet they were aware and not yet really aware of the events. So when they actually happened, people were shocked. There was a sort of silence, a sort of helplessness, or I call it a malaise to react to these things. And I found that even in these books that I had reviewed for, still that in Han Kang's Human Acts, it's about the Gwangju uprising, 1980, South Korea, and there was a period after the massacre, after the hundreds of people were killed in the streets. There was a brief period in which people were not reacting towards. There was a sort of people were zombies in a way. And you would, like, I would scroll through social media and you wouldn't see anyone. You would see people reacting, but they were not analytical of what had just happened. People are not talking about it in a sense that this is a thing that we should have expected to happen, you know. And I wanted this to come out in the reviews, that when the reader is reading a book about the 1974 revolution in Ethiopia, or about Ethiopian invasion 1935, or the South Korean massacres and all that, that they sort of reflect upon their own society within those stories. They sort of use that as a sieve for them to recognize certain things. Because recognize things like open or freedom of speech, recognize things like curfew, recognize things like militarization, you know, of things, closing down of businesses, you know. You recognize things like disappearance of normal citizens, you know. And these are things that have happened. They have happened in the past. They have happened even in our near past, and even the present. They keep happening. But there's that thing that I want to capture, that reaction, that social, societal sort of laziness or shock. I don't know how to explain it. And you see that I'm also trying to organize it in my mind to convey it. And this is what I would like to capture. I intended to capture in the reviews on the second drafts, and also maybe in future stories and future essays. And I think it is very important for readers, I know, as writers, to, whenever you're writing your story, to be true to who you are as a writer, as an individual, and also as a countryman, if you're writing in sort of political sense, and in presentation of ideologies and what is the effect these ideologies may have on your readers or other movements around you. So I hope in a roundabout I've sort of tackled the questions. So let me stop babbling.
Thank you, Achalam. Thank you for that. Charity, Jackie, Ongom, anyone would like to go?
Probably I could go on that. The first question is, did it change the story? I think history is a little bit static. It's just what it is. So I didn't need a time frame to write what I had to write. And then one of the factors that actually motivated me to be more to actually write is because I don't think I write as a result of a passion. I think for me, it weighs down on me more as an obligation, an expression of courage. We have this side of the story that we need to discuss as a country in transition.
Ongom's connection seems to be a Hello, Ongom, I think we seem to have your connection as well.
As a country in
we've lost Ongom.
Okay, so
okay.
I will speak
There he
quickly.
As we wait for him to, is he back?
No?
He seems to be back. Ongom, you're muted. We lost you for a moment.
Sorry, I think my internet is poor. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
So I was saying I don't write from a place of passion, but rather from a place of obligation. And looking at the place where we are today as youth, we are in a period of transition, political, economic, and there are many things that we are not discussing. One of them is we don't have a safe space to discuss neoliberalism. I've been at law school. I was a law student, and even the the academicians that we are supposed to, it's not satisfactory. What we are taught and what we receive, it's not satisfactory. So for me, it comes off from oops, my network is really disturbing. Yeah, so for me, it comes off from a place of obligation. Can we have this discussion? Can we have this conversation? So it was static. Nothing changed for me. I was lucky. There was a good editor by my side. So I didn't have so much pressure except to deliver the information the way I thought I should deliver them. So did it have an impact on me? Yeah, I think so, because I mean, we are being forced to turn our heroes into ghosts because we are not supposed to say certain things a certain way because it contravenes the normal, the normal.
Okay,
Rachel, okay. You're muted.
Yes.
History, when you talk about neoliberalism, so for me it's thank you. Sorry, I almost came in and disrupted. Sorry about that. So I was saying, for me, the influence it had on me was simply that it gave me an opportunity to finally hope that this is finally opening up for us to have certain conversations. And I'm grateful for that opportunity. Only praying it continues and probability will bear certain fruits. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Angom. We look forward to all the things that you are going to write and to discussing them and just opening up the spaces for people to really talk about who we are in every way that we are. So thank you so much for writing, and I'm glad that it is inspiring you to continue writing, to continue speaking, to continue documenting the things that you know and the things that you have experienced. So thank you again. Yeah. Karungi?
Oh, sorry, Jackie wanted to say something.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Karungi, please go ahead first. It's okay.
All right. So I was just saying that for me, because I wrote an essay as well, I don't think that the events of the general elections necessarily changed what I was writing, but rather informed or broadened what I was writing. So when you speak about national independence, 58 years later, you have to, you cannot avoid questioning the violence that we've experienced, the inequality that we continue to face, the injustice. You can't avoid questioning those things when you speak about national independence. However, during the general elections, you see those elements or the discrepancy between what the idea of national independence represents, the idea that it promotes, that it gives, and you see the discrepancy between that vision and the reality that we live as Ugandans, as the everyday, again, we the people, is just that we, the everyday person, this is the life that we are living, and these are the things that we are struggling with, that we are faced with, even as we celebrate. We celebrate, in quotes, celebrate independence and all of that. So yeah, so my essay did not necessarily change, but rather was broadened by the experiences of the general election. Do I think I agree with Doreen in that writing is a reflection of who we are, reflection of ourselves? Because personally, I find that it's one of the ways that through which I'm able to process experiences and especially my thoughts about those experiences, to be able to articulate what I think or what I feel about the experiences that I encounter.
Thank you, Charity. Yes, Jackie.
So in the essay that I wrote, I alluded to elections as a way for Uganda's latest boo to keep coming back to woo her every 5 years. That's the analogy I used. And I said that even as the suitor is wooing, we know that, history has shown there might not be much difference. And we wonder, as a younger sister, I'm wondering, doesn't my older sister see this? And how can I point it out to her differently? And indeed, we all went through the election. We saw the brutalization. We saw, the turning off of the internet. We saw all the things that happened. And so in a sense, my analogy and the essay that I write is still for all intents and purposes true.
Yeah.
In terms of reflection, and I think how I end even the essay is, when you understand that someone is family, you really, truly, truly try not to give up on them. Rachel, you said that if that was your oldest, you would do everything in your means. And the reflection for me has been, I cannot throw away Uganda. She's the sister I have. Love her or hate her, she's the sister I have. Mine is to ask, therefore, as a relative of my sister Uganda, what have I done? And have I done all I can do to, in a sense, right some of the wrongs that are within my ambit as a citizen? So yes, even when I know things are going wrong, I will show up to vote, because like Ongom says, at some point it's responsibility. Will I continue to challenge corruption? Yes, because it's my responsibility. Will I continue to appear in police stations, helping people find their lost ones, or standing surety when everybody is afraid of certain, especially political prisoners? Yes, I will, because it is my duty, because I so love my country that I cannot sit back. And so in a sense, it's a renewal of Uganda is who I have. She's really who I have. And I will, and it's also strange that when I'm long gone, Uganda will still be. She's that sister who lives on forever. So for the time that I am with my sister, I will do the best I can to stand with her, to stand by her, to celebrate her, because indeed, are there beautiful things about Uganda? Yes. And part of my work right now is to celebrate generosity and philanthropy, and to tell the stories of community coming together, peoples, as Ashley was talking about, right? That we see resilience, we see passion, we see compassion, deep, deep compassion. There are beautiful things, deeply beautiful things about Uganda, as there are deeply troubling things. And I guess maybe, indeed, to Doreen's point, maybe it is a reflection of ourselves, each Ugandan walking on this boundary called Uganda, that we are deeply troubled, but also deeply beautiful. So how do you live with that every day?
As I had said earlier, the people that we are with are full of wonderful and deep things in their heads. Thank you so much to all of you for answering our questions. Now I would like to go into answering some of our audience questions. I know we are past 6 o'clock, but I am believing that Gutu Zentrum is going to give us some extra time, just so that we can get our audience involved in this. Thank you so much for your answers. Thank you for your input and your time. So yes, I think I'll start from the bottom and make my way up. Yes, someone comments on YouTube. There's a comment from YouTube. I don't have a name attached to this, but yes, this is for Ongom, or maybe all of us. How do we reconcile the oral history the elders have with the history in books or that is taught in schools? They say that Ongom's essay Ongom's essay shocked me and forced me to question my political education classes. We can start with Ongom because the comment was based on his statement, but anyone else can also take a shot at it.
Well, luckily, it's not all oral history because most of these things are actually documented. Yeah, I'm muted. Yeah, so it's not all oral history because most of these things that I was able to write about are very recent occurrences in our country, and they're all documented. The books are there, but then you won't get them, of course. It is interesting at the MOOC main library or just at a restock, but the books are actually there. It just takes a little bit of effort to get them and the right person to get them. For me, what inspired me to get to that point, I have to ask myself, but where are these books? Is because of the oral history, the oral narratives and conversations you get to have with elders who have probably been there and they're trying to say, hey, young man, this is not actually what happened. There's this other side of the story. And out of inquisitiveness, you're like, but can you prove? I can't just talk. Tell me, where's the authority? And someone brings out a book and is like, whoa, get this. Like the first time I read Andre de la Rue's essay on the rise and fall of Gracie Bingira, I was shocked. I mean, how did the CIA actually get involved in Uganda in 1964? I mean, it was baffling. So all these facts are there, and it only needs us to come out a little bit more courageously and try to dig them up for our own good. So I think the histories are there, the books are there, the authorities are there, the oral histories are just corroborative facts that help to understand and believe better the two sides of the stories. And like Karunji, the editor says, there has to be a bit of objectiveness. I think I was also a little bit biased, you know, getting one side of the story and being struck by this reality. You easily bought into the new narrative. So we have to maintain our objectivity so that we can have a decent conversation without sticking so much on our biases. Yes.
And I think it's also to recognize that there are as many histories, literally, as there are Ugandans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we all experience Uganda from different locations, from our gender locations, our economic locations, our ethnic locations, our age locations. Like it is, and I think we continue to do our students a disservice when we present history as one text per term and you sit an exam of 3 books as though that is all the stories that there are. And so, and I think for us as Africans, it's a mix of the oral with the written, with the, so, and I only found out this much later after I'd left school. Like, I wish I had been able to sit at the feet of a multiplicity of books and literally presented as a menu where you go and a buffet where you pick and choose what you can swallow for now, and maybe that you'll keep for later, and maybe, and so I think there is a conversation that needs to happen regarding our education and how we learn, and whose stories also are even in the space, whose stories are written and whose are not. So anyhow, yeah.
Have a go at it. I like what Adero talked about oral histories being corroborative. And as a writer, and as editor, the editor pushes you to be more objective, especially if you're doing histories. And what Jackie talked about, there are as many histories as there are Ugandans, because history, as they said, the popular saying is written by the victor, and that in itself is subjective. The victor chooses what to write and what not to write. So the books that are available, the 10 books that are available, will tell what the writer wants to tell, what they researched and all that. And there's histories that are told. For example, my grandfather told me the story of the Lamogi rebellion that I have not found in any text anywhere. And because there is no text that can corroborate what my grandfather told me about that Chief and the Lamogi rebellion, I sort of build this as the person, probably the person who's asking the question, has that doubt that maybe the whole history is wrong compared to what has been written, because people associate facts to what has been written to, as opposed to something that is just by word of mouth. So I think our duty as writers, and that is also in line of what Adero said, duty to be true to who we are, in that brings in the aspect of research, to research as intensely as we can to make sure that even if there's a disconnect, dichotomy between what has been written about maybe Obote's arresting of members of parliament and what personal accounts from oral telling by these members of parliament, when there's a disconnect, that disconnect must be, the reader must be able to tell or understand that history in itself is not a thing of yes, there are incidences where history tells a fact, and there are incidences where history presents a subjective opinion as fact. And our job as writers, especially for those of us who are writing essays, political essays, if I may say, is to make sure that we make sure our reader knows what opinions are being misrepresented as facts, and what actually happened, and what is subjective, you know. Yes, so I think that's what I think about. And about our education system, it is a known fact. Our education system is one for regurgitation. You take in and you just spew what you took in, and you get your marks and go on, and that's it. And we need to have a sort of instill that curiosity that Adero talked about, that curiosity to go beyond the books, the academic books that we read, have that self-drive to look for those books that are not very difficult, and such that we may be able to shock our readers the way Ongom did. Yes.
Could I say something? So I'm interested in how different societies have taken their oral histories and what was originally oral, and have transmitted that into written. I think one of the things that we struggle with as a continent is that we have been slow. We have been slow to translate our oral into the written. Whether it's slow or hesitant, we've not changed. We've not taken our oral stories and converted them into written form as quickly as I think we should. I'm just looking at some of the comments that are coming in, and you see that many of us we know of stories, whether stories of family, stories of the nation, stories of the continent, that have been told to us in oral form. But experience shows that the oral form is not well preserved. With, when you think about, say, like, for example, the Chinese whisper, with each new person that is told the story, it takes on a different form, it takes on a different shape. Some elements are left out, some elements are emphasized that were not there originally. It changes. But in written form, it can be preserved much longer. And so therefore, I'm always encouraging myself and encouraging others to write. I see someone asking, how do we have all these stories, what do we do about them? I would say to you, write those stories. Write those stories, and then have those stories fact-checked and preserved, so that in years to come, the descendants, those to come, would have a reference point as well.
Thank you so much, guys, for all of that. Thank you for answering that question. I think you have covered even some of the other questions that have been asked regarding it. So to change direction a bit, there is a question here for Charity from YouTube, asking how you deal with my work isn't good enough as a writer and editor. That's something that the person deals with. It's something I struggle with. and I'm certain many people struggle with, regardless of the field of work?
I think for me, it's an ongoing process. So it deals with my own, say, esteem issues, where as an individual, I have to work on feeling inadequate. And so there's that dynamic to it. Now, if I'm struggling in that regard, and then I have to present this output, whether it's a story or whatever else I'm doing, that interplay can become very chaotic for me. I'd get anxious, I get panicky, and all of that. However, what I've learned, especially working with Ibua, is that as a writer, it's important that you develop a group of trusted people who will assess your work and whose assessment you can detach from your identity as a person, your view of self. And so in working, so I come as a writer, and I've had to learn to be comfortable with a certain group of people reading my work and hearing their feedback, even when they say to me, no, we don't get the point here, change it. And being comfortable enough to say, okay, that's not about me. That's not saying I'm not good enough. They're just saying the work needs to be improved, and it can be improved, right? Now, working as an editor has helped me gain better appreciation for that role as well, because I know my intent when I approach a writer's submission. I know that my goal is to help them, whether it's rearranging the ideas, whether it's removing, unnecessary stuff, reminding them that they are writing, that the way we write is different from the way we speak, that kind of thing. And so in my work as an editor, understanding the value that the editor brings to the process, I have learned to appreciate, I've learned to be comfortable with my work as a writer, submitting my output for editing.
I would like to also speak to that, especially dealing with the sensation that that your work isn't good enough. Let me use a story. Recently, I've been taking part in the Ibua short fiction lab, and now I call myself a writer. But participating in the lab has made me question my abilities as a writer, because there are things like, I didn't know that, or I didn't get that. So it's really opened my eyes to the idea of the work I do as simply being work. It has nothing to do with me as a person. It is the way I would approach baking. I learned how to bake. So you have a recipe, you follow the recipe, and a cake comes out. But if you, there are techniques that can help the cake get better, or if you don't know them, you might miss something and the cake doesn't quite come out right. And the idea that sometimes experienced bakers have a bad day and the cake doesn't work. It can be the oven was too hot, you changed altitudes, you needed to check your temperature, or the oven you're using isn't working. So separating the work itself from yourself and just looking at it as, is it good? If it's not good, then maybe something's missing. I missed some baking powder here, or I didn't put in enough sugar, that kind of thing. And just looking at it that way and allows me to actually process the work and to do it well, and be able to apply myself regardless of how I feel about myself, for instance. Yeah. Yeah, so I think going on to another question. Jackie is having a lively discussion here about history and its relevance. Someone has asked Ongom if you can help us. Oh, did we lose Ongom? No, he's right there. If you can just share with us the titles of those books, some of the books that you referenced, that you used for reference, and where we could find them, that would be really great, great for us. And then, yes, so you just forgive me because I'm scrolling up. There's a comment from Rachel K29 on Twitter. She says, I related to Asimwe's write-up. I wanted to cry for Uganda, but I realized Uganda is that sister who you cry for until you can't do it anymore. You give up and hope she finds lasting peace and goodness. Yeah, so it's quite something. It really definitely touched many of us. Yes, someone asking about, there's a question here, I'm going to read it. Then together I think we can understand it. But yes, we have guards who hold guns. Isn't this a culture transplant from the old days? Because guards were to guard from the outside influence and coming in the nation as is. So I guess guards are there to protect from external influence. So are we not guarding from the extra influences, and mostly because of the mistrust among the different tribes? And this needs extreme measures of security to be taken into consideration. Any takers here?
I think let me try. I think that that statement is perhaps in reference to the essay I write, because I speak about the presence of security gun holding security guards everywhere we go, and no one argues that the guard's role is to protect the premise, to protect the people, and what have you. What I try to point out, though, is that because we are accustomed to seeing even the security guard holding a gun, we are desensitized to the idea of, to the idea of violence. We expect, we sort of, let me give an example. During the general elections, we had an increasing number of police and then even military on the streets. But if you think about the way we went about our lives, on the daily, you sort of walk down the road, not so apprehensive of the 5 men near you holding guns. We are so desensitized to that idea. And so when the violence takes the turn, when the elections take the turn that they do and they get even more violent, we are not necessarily surprised by that. And so the question is it possible for us to not have the gun used? Can peace be established without the gun? Can conflict be resolved without that, without violence, without, so it's just, I was trying to point out that the esteem, whether it's in our politics or our everyday life, the esteem of the gun.
Okay. Thank you so much.
It's interesting you say that, Charity, because if you remember when President Museveni came to power, he said one of the things he wanted to do, and therefore it explains Chankwanzi, was to demystify the gun. Because prior, when you saw a gun, you either fled or just looked for the nearest space to become invisible to the gun holder. So there was indeed a time that we were utterly terrorized and terrified by the gun. And I'm sure maybe in the city, it has become so commonplace that at least we've lost that fright and flight.
That shock, yeah.
Yeah. But does that necessarily therefore translate into? I think, you know, it's for me. We also, I think, at the back of our mind, in our psyche, the reason why I think we just keep still is because we know if things broke down, that thing that we are passing by as though we don't care, we know it still has the capacity to harm us in ways we can't recover from. So maybe, yeah, it's just that uncomfortable trauma that we've, you know, okay, let me live with this, but knowing that if it can be unleashed in ways that we are scared of, and indeed why our democracy being so fragile is again, if we take the Uganda is my big sister, you're uncomfortable with who she's courting, but how do you say it? Because good manners is you just put up and go on. So I don't know, yeah, whether we've become that. You just put up and hope that one day we will know better, but for now, this is what we have. And let's pretend we're not seeing it and look at other things, kind of thing, yeah? Maybe it's also become our way to deflect rather than necessarily to be comfortable.
And
okay, guys.
But when you say that,
sorry, Karungi.
sorry,
We have extended our host's time. We are really grateful for this. As you can see, this conversation can go on for hours. Thank you so much, every one of you, for being here. I had a grand plan where you would tell us what you would be listening to, but maybe we can text that later for the audience and just to share it on our web pages. And now I want to hand over to Annie. Yeah, thank you so much to God Zentum, and yes, we shall be sharing what Ibua is doing on our pages. So please follow us there at www.Ibua Journal. Find us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. So thank you very much, everybody.
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to share our upcoming events with you before we end this session. First of all, thank you for Rachel for the moderation, and of course, thank you for the writers and editors who were here and shared their thoughts and opinions with us. So thank you very much. I want to highlight the 13th of August because we have a special event together with the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung there. It's about the rise and fall of the Berlin Wall, which happened 60 years ago, and it was a really major historical event for Germany. I want to point out that event because we have an open call ongoing for performing artists. So the performing artist can be a musician, a poet, anything. So please check out our Instagram and Facebook page so you can see what we are exactly looking for. We are looking forward to your application. Then on Wednesday, the 18th of August, we have our next FemWrite reading. We will share some more information about that in the next couple of days, but you're more than welcome to join. Yeah, it's going to be an online reading again, since we are not sure what's going to happen during the lockdown. Is it going to be eased or extended? So we just prepare everything online. At the end of August, we will have a new format. It's called Dogs Day. We will show short documentaries from Africa, this time especially from Uganda, and it's going to be about mental health. So we will broadcast 2 short documentaries, and also we will have a Q&A session with the filmmakers. So you're also welcome to join it. But just in general, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and you will find all the information and open calls we have. And thank you for tonight.
Thank you so much too.
Thank you for hosting us,
everybody.
We can also
Bye.
wave and say goodbye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.